Storm Tracker rates Weather University on WRIC Now is sponsored by Blank & Marcus, attorneys at law. Nice guys working to make a difference.
And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first edition at the brand new WRIC Now Studios, Weather University. And joining me is Storm Tracker 8 meteorologist Jacqueline Waters. Jacqueline, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It was a lovely weekend, but it was an important weekend because it was the start of the 2024 hurricane season.
That is true. Meteorological summer also, and we're just getting into the summer months, which means we have to start talking about hurricanes.
We do have to start talking about hurricanes. And the one thing, I'm just going to adjust my camera here because I think I'm a little bit off. Let's see if I can do that. That's a little bit better. Just a touch more. There we go. And the thing is, when we talk about hurricanes, we, of course, watch the Atlantic Ocean, we watch the Caribbean, and we watch the Gulf of Mexico. But let's talk about the formation of hurricanes. The number one thing we need is water temperatures 80 degrees Fahrenheit or better.
I mean, that's pretty much the most important thing for those hurricanes to form, because we need that moist air and we need it to rise and just basically start developing into this storm. So we're expecting active season, which we'll talk about, because the oceans are just getting warmer.
They are getting warmer. And, you know, we mentioned last year, we saw storms that erupted. I mean, really, tropical storm went all the way to a Category 5 in a matter of, 24 hours, because those waters are just so warm. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But you mentioned there rising air. Why is that important?
It's important because basically warm air rises, and we have that warm, moist air rising, and it develops these clouds. And then you have this basically birth of a hurricane, and it just keeps building these storms, and then the whole structure of the hurricane ends up developing. And
the storms is really the key, because a hurricane or tropical system is nothing more than clusters of storms that have come together that are now forming, and they start to create their own wind field where they're turning as one big weather system.
Yes, and you have all those different types of specifics in the hurricane: the eye wall, the eye, the rain bands, and it's just this massive storm. And
we talk about all those all the time. Yeah, so much for sure. So let's talk about it. So the waters have to be warm. And right now, we talked about the beach forecast this morning. The water temperature off Virginia Beach was about 70. The water temperature off of the Outer Banks, about 73. So that's still a little chilly. But over time in summer, that water really warms up.
It does really warm up. And you could feel it even just like I was at the beach the other weekend. You could feel it. It's a little bit cold out there. But as the summer goes on, it warms up more. And that's why we have that peak in hurricane season in September. So quiet now, but things are definitely going to get active.
Yeah, and we usually start to look, as you said, September 10th is that peak for named storms and also for hurricanes. But kind of like mid-October to mid-August to like early October is that big window, like that 45-day window where, I mean, sometimes we've seen it 4, 5, 6 named systems at one time. It's incredible.
I know, it is incredible. And I mean, this season is going to be a very active season as well, as NOAA's forecasting, Colorado State University. I mean, the average hurricanes we usually get is 7.2, and you can see both those forecasts are above it. And the major hurricanes too, which is the really devastating one.
And that's the ones that are Category 3 or better. The technical number is 111 miles per hour for the Category 3, but we usually kind of see the statements written 115 miles per hour. But here are the different categories. This is something we call the Saffir-Simpson scale, going from Category 1 to Category 5, 5 being the strongest. And unfortunately, recently, we have seen some Category 5s. I think back to Michael a few years ago.
Yeah, I think of Hurricane Sandy. I was in Long Island, and it was very devastating. And hopefully we don't see a lot of these devastating ones make landfall this year. But of course, we'll be watching it.
We will be watching it. Of course, we talk about the birth of a hurricane. We talk about how they form, but there's different little stages of development. The first one is a tropical depression. This is where we use our satellites that float in space, that we're constantly watching the clouds, and we start to see some rotation, but not a lot of wind speed. We might say, hey, based on the indications, we have an area of low pressure. This is a depression.
Yes. And then it just ends up forming into a tropical storm, which is wind speeds over 39 miles per hour, so 39 to 73, and that's where it gets named. And that's when we really keep a close eye on it, because we don't want it to form into a hurricane. But if it gets over 73 miles per hour to 74 miles per hour, that's when it's that category 1. So.
Right. And then the category 1, this is when we start to see maybe the eye wall developing, the eye of the hurricane. And then, of course, we talk about a major hurricane, winds 115 miles per hour or stronger, category 3, 4, and 5. And this is, as you said before, becomes very devastating. But you mentioned there before, tropical storm is when it gets its name. And this is the list, the first list of names that we'll be talking about.
And it starts with Alberto, and it goes all the way to William. And it's important to note they retire the really devastating hurricanes, so you'll never see like Katrina in there, Sandy, any of those really devastating ones. But we don't make the names; the National Hurricane Center does. So This is the list for this year. And in 2021, they transitioned over from a Greek alphabet for the second list to just another named list.
Which was back in 2019, we had a tremendous amount of names,
20.
right? 20 was the 21s when they made the switch. So 20, I mean, we blew through this list. All of a sudden, we were alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and everybody's going, what? Am I back in college here? Am I pledging a fraternity or sorority or something? So, yeah. So then we do have the second list of names, Adria, Braylon, Caridad, and the list goes on. Let's hope we don't get into that, but we are saying it is going to be an active season for sure. Now, this is interesting because I think a lot of people think when we get hurricanes, it's wind, but it's so much more than wind that causes problems.
I mean, I think a lot of people maybe think about the wind because that's how we base it. The Saffir-Simpson scale is based on the wind. But, I mean, 86% of fatalities is actually caused by water. And it's basically split even, 37% storm surge and 37% inland flooding. And also surf currents, offshore water issues, and water causes a lot of issues.
It does really cause a tremendous amount. And we talk about storm surge. Let's just kind of explain that. So, because we talk about when hurricanes are coming close to shore. If you think about it, these hurricanes are so strong, they can actually help to raise the water level up sometimes 3 feet, 5 feet, sometimes even more than that. And then these large waves can propagate on shore, and it causes a tremendous amount of erosion, can cause widespread devastation. Water is super powerful. We go and we talk to schools, we talk to, elementary kids, and we say, hey, who's ever gotten into a pool? And everybody raises their hand. Who's ever been in the ocean? And they raise their hand. And we say, is it tough to run in a pool or in the ocean? Yes, it is, because you're trying to push against the water. Well, think about that water pushing against you, against your house, and things like that. So, yeah, water is certainly very, very strong.
It only takes, I believe it's 6 inches of flowing water to knock down an adult. So that's why we always say turn around, don't drown. Especially with storm surge.
Whoa, yeah, storm surge is really, really bad. All right, so let's say that a hurricane is coming, Jacqueline, and we want to start preparing. We don't know that it's coming, but we're in hurricane season. So there's some items that you could always have on hand in your pantry, whatever the case may be. Batteries, extra cash, a first aid kit, flashlights. You want to have some food, whether, canned food, whatever, tools. Just an idea like, hey, we're in that season now. Are we ready?
Yes. And especially as we talked about, we start off pretty slow in the season, but it's good to start thinking about these things. Have a plan with your family in case a hurricane starts making its way towards us. So.
Right. And then we start to get, okay, now we have a hurricane. It's coming toward our location. Let's say it's coming, into Virginia Beach, going to come toward Richmond, come toward Central Virginia. And we have some areas in our viewing audience that will be under evacuation. So what do you got to do? You got to leave if there's mandatory evacuations. Look, you don't have to, but you're silly not to, because nobody's coming to rescue you once it's too late. So mandatory evacuation, let's get out. You got to protect your home. You want to secure it. You were talking about, boarding it up with plywood and things like that. And you want to have at least 3 days of supplies, because you're going to be on the road going to somewhere. And, if you're coming from Virginia Beach to Richmond, all of our hotels are going to be filled up. So now you go to Charlottesville, all their hotels are filled up. The next thing you know, you're sitting out in the central part of West Virginia, up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where there's hotels available or something like that.
Definitely important. It's better to have more stuff than not enough stuff. And medicine is definitely important. If you take daily medicine, to have that nearby, and wait until officials tell you to come home.
Right. Don't try to come home in the middle of it. I want to see what my house looks like. No, you can't do that. Now, if you are going to stay around, and because there's not an evacuation for you, you got to be prepared for power outages. I think back to Isabel, where many places in Central Virginia two and a half weeks without power. I can't even imagine, right? I mean, most people go 48 hours without power. They're like, oh.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, I guess it's controversial, but I like being without power, and it forces like my family and friends to play board games with me with candles, but it's not good.
No, it isn't for sure, right? You want to cover windows again. You want to have at least 2 weeks of supplies. You talk about bottled water. You're talking about canned foods and non-perishable food. A lot of people have propane grills. Have an extra tank of propane just in case, or if you have a small pet food. We're going to talk about pets as well. And you want to stay connected to local media. And that's as simple as this, right? Because even though your power is off, we have a generator that is powering us. We will stay on, and we will continue to send out a signal like this through WRIC Now, where once you get your power back, or if you can have your phone, you can still, if the towers are not out, be able to watch a broadcast, find out information, find out where there may be water or get food or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, make sure you have those power banks also.
The charges, those bricks, and have chargers for your car, because you might be able to start your car to charge your phone. A lot of people do. And you mentioned before, think about your pets. Really important.
Yes, I think about my dog more than me, but it is important to think about them because you're not going to leave them behind. If you get evacuated, or even if you're sheltering in place, you want to make sure you have all the proper stuff, the leash, all the documents, pet food, toys and treats, because that's important, and definitely water and numerous things. So
yeah, and the pets are going to be, they're going to feel the change as well. They're going to see that we're a little concerned. They're worried about us. They have that sixth sense.
Exactly.
Really,
they can sense when something's coming, and definitely my dog. Anytime I'm packing, he knows. So yeah.
And you have a thunder blanket for your dog too, right?
I do.
For thunderstorms.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's terrified of everything. I have a thunder blanket. I make him like calming treats because this is stressful for them too.
Yeah.
So.
It really is.
Take care of those pets.
And if you're going to evacuate with your pets, do not leave your pets behind, right? No, number one, right? But gosh forbid you get separated. Have a photo of your pet. I mean, that's the worst thing. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, definitely have a photo. Have your medical records. I always have my dog's medical records on my phone in case anything happens. It's nice to pull up in case you have to go somewhere and you need to show that.
Right.
Get in somewhere, and just make sure you have a plan.
Yeah.
You don't want to get separated.
And again, if you're driving away because you're being evacuated, you may have to call numerous hotels in a distance to find out, because not every hotel is pet friendly, and you really want them to be at that time, of course. So yeah, keep that in mind. All right. So real quick, again, Jacqueline, we expect it's going to be a very active season, as you said. Let's hope. So the one thing I want to stress, we show these numbers here. These are a forecast for the possibilities, but it's not a forecast of where storms may hit or not hit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's when we come in play. So
right.
We keep an eye on it. We let you guys know. Hopefully, again, it's not as active as we want.
Right. Or if it's like last year was relatively active, but everything stayed out to sea, except for like Ophelia, which brought us some rain, and a couple others, but it wasn't super crazy. But we're going to watch this very carefully, because we are going to what's called ENSO neutral. We'll talk about that another time, but that just means that things can really fire up because things are going to warm up really quickly. Anyway, Jacqueline, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been our first WRIC Now Weather University. We got to kind of like baptize the whole thing here. We're going to do this every week, talk about different things. We'll stay on the tropical topics for a while, but as severe weather happens, we'll jump in here. We'll talk about having a plan for that day and things like that. And we'll have different guests in as well. So this is going to be a whole lot of fun, which is great.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, Jacqueline. And we'll see you coming up in about 20 minutes.